You are listening to Personal Development Mastery Podcast, where you will find both the inspiration to grow and the actions to implement towards your next level. I am your host, Agi Keramidas, and my mission is to inspire you to stand out and live your best life. I interview thought leaders, authors, entrepreneurs, spiritual teachers, exceptional people who will inspire you to improve your life and offer, through their wisdom, actions you can take and implement. Tune in for 2 new episodes each week and make sure you follow the podcast to get the episodes as soon as they are released. Welcome to episode 205, and today I'm sharing the conversation I had with Steve Werner on his podcast, Grow Your Impact, Income and Influence. It was a fascinating conversation between two fellow podcasters, and we talked about how you can reach potentially millions of people using a podcast, and discussed also some things that are relevant to general communication and also about influencing people. And the classic book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, was mentioned in there. Steve teaches people how to speak on stage. So one theme throughout our conversation is communication. We also spoke about perfectionism and why I believe that done is better than perfect. I hope you enjoy the conversation, and if you do, check out Steve's podcast, Grow Your Impact, Income and Influence, and I will put a link in the show notes.
Welcome back to Grow Your Impact, Income, and Influence, the number one show to help you reach millions of people, whether you are online, in person, wherever you are at. Today, we are specifically talking about influencing people. How can you reach millions of people using a podcast? This is a question I get all the time, but today's guest has interviewed more than 150 people. He has one of the top 2% podcasts in the world, and his business is helping people start a podcast. Who better than to talk about that? Agi, how are you doing today?
Steve, thank you very much for your lovely introduction. I'm awesome. Thank you. And it's great to be here.
No problem. It is my pleasure. So you've done a lot of things. Your bio specifically, you kind of talk about how you help people live the next level of their life. That's what your podcast is about. But as you've built up traction over the years, more than 150 interviews with some really, really big names, you've started to see that people want to know how to do podcasts. So you have a free ebook that is linked down in the show notes, but take us back to where all of this started for you, because I know so many people say, I would love to start a podcast, and then they have no idea what to do. How did you get started, and how did you overcome those bumps in the beginning?
Thank you. This is a great place to start, I think. And during my personal development journey, I started turning from a closed introvert person to a more able to express himself, and I did public speaking. So podcasting in a way felt like a step forward to express myself more. To specifically, I remember I got inspired to do a podcast when I was at an event, and there was a speaker on stage, and he was talking about how podcasting changed his life and career and income and all these things. And I got very inspired. I went home and I bought some, microphones immediately, secondhand from eBay. I said, I'm going to do it. And then for about 6 months, I just kept them there because I didn't know what to talk about. I had quite a hesitation. And then I was part of a mastermind group, and another person over there, we had at some point a conversation about personal development, me and him. We were talking about our morning routines or something like that. And another person in the group said, you two guys are very good, actually, very entertaining when you talk about this. Have you thought of doing a podcast together? And that was, the light bulb. And that was when I actually made use of those microphones, because then I knew that it would be a podcast on personal development. That was my first podcast, and it was me and a friend of mine talking about what we had both in common and very passionate about, and that was personal development. So that's how I started with it. That was 3.5 years ago, something like that.
That's a good way to get started. I think a lot of people do that. I know when I first wanted to do a podcast, I did the same thing. I bought a mic. I had a mic because I wanted to sound better on Zoom calls, but I was like, I need a real podcasting mic. So I went and bought a real mic. Then I bought a video camera. Then I bought all the stuff, but I was still playing around. I actually did. So I've had 3 different podcasts. This is the third and longest running one. The first 2 were just me randomly talking about stuff. And then I think I did a few interviews, but then when I started interviewing people, that's when things really started to grab traction for me. How did things go with you? So you started doing the personal development stuff, but did it stay with you and a partner? Did it move to just you?
No, it actually evolved, because after a while, most of our episodes were, this conversational co-host style, but I interviewed a couple of people out of curiosity, and I thought, let me see how that feels. And I realized that I felt very good. And I also, of course, in the beginning, I was very stressed out about it, because I had never done an interview before. So that was quite interesting. We can talk about this if you want. But what I found out quickly was that I really enjoyed it. And I got some feedback from the people who I was interviewing that, you are asking great questions. And that kind of led me at some point to realize that I want to do more interviews. And the best way to do them was to create a second podcast, which was my own podcast, the Personal Development Mastery, which is my... the other one is still there, but we're doing the episodes now and again, not very frequently. We still talk about it from time to time because it's great. The interviews was something that was a game changer, I think, for me. And I'm sure you understand that too. And I believe people who have done podcasting know what we're talking about. I felt, and I will explain only one thing, and then I'll pass the ball over to you to ask me if you want something more specific. Especially in the beginning, most of my guests were coaches from the coaching or personal development space. So I felt like I was speaking with a different coach every week, because I got to ask things that were really on my mind, of course, based on their experience and expertise. But I was getting to ask whatever I wanted, and that really expanded my knowledge, things that I got and I implemented, and, accelerated things.
I mean, it is super fun to interview people. I mean, I love doing the podcast. I found like the best way, this comes straight from How to Win Friends and Influence People, which I read at 13 or 14 years old, but it's always be interested in other people, be curious. And that is one of the best things. And this about podcasting, right? I meet a new person. I usually do 2 or 3 podcast interviews a week, and I get to meet new people. I get to learn about them. And even if the subject matter, if you've been a longtime listener to the show, I interview people that sometimes have overlapping subject matter, but they have a completely different experience with that subject matter. So there's so much there. So one thing I want to go back and talk about, because I think there are probably people listening to this, they're either thinking about starting a podcast, or maybe they've gone out and they've bought the microphone, they've bought the recorder, they've tried to play around with it, but there are some tech hurdles to overcome, and there's also some setup hurdles to overcome. Can you talk a little bit about, in the beginning, how did you move forward? How did you get off of the couch, get the microphones plugged in? What were some of the stressors that you had, and how did you overcome them?
There were many, actually, and I will leave tech for a moment. I will speak about the technical stuff, but I think another thing which is really, for me, very important, if not the most important for someone listening that wants to do a podcast, is to answer Really, I believe it's important. Two simple questions, but they are very simple, but the answers need to be detailed. And the first question is, why do you want to have a podcast? And the second question is, who do you want to make a podcast for? So I'm saying that because I didn't necessarily do it like that. I discovered those things along the way, but I believe they are the great foundation on which for someone to start, making a podcast. Because if you know why you're doing it and who are you doing it for, I believe that motivates you more to stand up from the couch. It's not a vague idea. I would like to make a podcast sometime. So it gets more, specific, and you can work on it. As for the tech that you asked, I took the hard way. I learned to do everything myself. Every single thing I would download guides from other people, or watch webinars, or listen to podcasts about how to do things. And I was learning along by trial and error. So it was a long learning curve. I never regret it because it was my personal choice at that time. And to be honest, I really enjoyed it. So I was not, dreading it. I enjoyed, putting the stuff into the editing software and doing things with that, and noise reduction. I learned to do that, and for me, it was something fulfilling. However, I would expect, and I don't know what your thoughts about that is, I would expect that most people will not get this high buzz from doing noise reduction, sound editing things. So, for me,
I know on my end, I definitely the first podcast I did was just me recording into a voice recorder on my phone and then uploading it. And I actually used a free video editor. I uploaded the audio file and then had bumpers that went on both ends, and I crammed it together and I put it out. And it wasn't, I didn't mess with noise reduction. I didn't mess with a lot of it because I'm much more let's get it going, get into momentum, and then I'm going to make it better and make it better. But I know so many people who have tried to get started and they get stuck and hung up with everything. And my advice, you can definitely give me your feedback on this, but is just to get something out there. As you start moving forward, things are going to change. The podcast that you start is probably not going to be once you get 10 episodes in, is going to be different because you're going to learn how to talk. You're going to learn how to interview. You're going to learn about subject matter. What do you think about all that?
Most certainly, I agree with you. You get better as you go along, for sure. What I would see slightly differently is it depends on who it is that is doing the podcast. If you're starting out of curiosity and you want to create a podcast and see how it goes and things like that, then I agree you can take it very simply, record it very simply without anything fancy, and put it out there, and this way you get better, you get feedback, and so on. If, however, that is my personal opinion, if you are an entrepreneur, a coach, someone who's highly successful in their field, and they want to make a podcast, I think that many would prefer not to have this amateur beginning. They would like to have something that from the outset it sounds professional, it sounds, up to the brand that they are or represent. That was not what I did at all, and from what I understand, that was not what you did. So it really, depends. But if it's a matter of starting something and putting it out there, by all means, start and get better and tweak it. I'm sure if I listen right now to my episode 1 or 2, which I deliberately avoid listening to, I would probably laugh because it was, a long time ago. I'm at episode 190 now on my second podcast. So it's been a journey. But yeah, there's nothing wrong either way. It depends on where is it that you want to start, or whether you want to start doing something quickly and learn as you go, or having something that want you to be very as well presented as possible. I just wanted to take a short break from this episode and let you know about a new project I'm very excited and passionate about. For me, having a podcast made a tremendous difference in my life's journey, and I know the kind of impact it can have. And that's why I'm so excited about this new project, helping coaches who are ready to reach a global audience and increase their impact by launching and scaling their own top quality podcast, even if they aren't tech savvy and are limited on time. So if you've thought about having your own podcast, but you don't want to go through the time-consuming learning processes of how to create and launch a podcast, of how to record, edit, host, syndicate, and so on, then I got a solution for you. A solution that takes away all the complexity and allows you to only concentrate on creating quality content and nothing else. Go to my website, 𝘁𝗸𝗃𝗲𝘄𝘆𝗀 to find out more about my service and to get your copy of my free guide about creating and launching your podcast. Alright, let's jump back to the episode.
Well, I think I'm going to talk about mindset stuff just for a little bit. And that's right in your wheelhouse. I think a lot of people, what stops them, I teach people how to speak on stage, right? That's my main thing. How do you do a live event? How do you speak on stage? How do you do webinars? And what I see hold a lot of people back in that space is they are so scared of what other people are going to think about them that it stops them from taking action because they want it to be perfect. So I call this the perfection line. It was originally taught by a lady named 𝗷𝗲𝘃𝗆𝗯 is where I saw it. I expounded on it. I'll go through it though. Imagine that you have a horizontal line going from left to right. Left is I'm getting it done. It's dirty. It's fast. It's out there. And right, all the way on the right, is the perfect version of it. Mm-hmm. What most people do because they are so scared of being judged and because they have imposter syndrome, they don't see themselves as perfect, so they want to put a perfect face out. They try to put out the most perfect version of whatever it is. Well, the thing is, when you don't know how to do something, there's a huge learning curve and it is really hard and you have all this self-doubt. So we try to put something out that's all the way on the right. But the truth is, and I know this was true with podcasting, my first episode, I think I got 3 downloads. Nobody saw it. The first couple of YouTube videos I put out, we now have over 300 YouTube videos. The first YouTube video, same thing. Nobody's watching, but I spent probably 20 hours on that, editing it, making sure that everything was perfect. And one of the things that I saw with 𝗁𝗃 Neistat, right? Casey just shot really raw video. He didn't edit a lot. He made sure that the sound was clean. That's the most important thing, is make sure that there's not crackles and pops. But where I'm going with this line, in the beginning, it is far better to be closer to the left side, the fast, dirty, get it done, get it out there. And then as you get better at stuff, because as you get better, your audience gets bigger. And as your audience gets bigger, then you have to get things a little bit more perfect. They have to be a little bit more dialed in. But you have a bigger audience. So that's when it's more important to start moving. And you will naturally move that way because you're getting experience. If you try to be perfect, I see so many people fail to launch, whether it's a podcast or a YouTube channel or getting a speaking gig, because they're trying to make it perfect, and just getting it out there and figuring it out. Because as you get it out there, you will figure it out and things will change. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but that's the perfection line.
Yes, I do. I remember the phrase, done is better than perfect. And that applies every single time for a very simple reason, that perfection does not exist. And that's coming from me, I'm a recovering perfectionist. I have been like pretty much all my life until the last 2-3 years when I started realizing that perfectionism was the way that I was describing my fear of taking action, my impostor syndrome, my procrastination. So I would, rather than admit the harsh truth to myself that this is really what's stopping me, I would camouflage it as perfectionism, and not take the action because it was not good enough yet. But I have realized, and that I think that's important for everyone that listens to, since you mentioned perfectionism, that it doesn't exist. It's imaginary. There is nothing that is perfect. I don't know if you can think of an example apart from metaphysical stuff, maybe, which is another conversation. But what is it that can't be even better than what it is? Because perfect, that's what perfect is, isn't it? That you can't really improve on it anymore. That's impossible. So doing and learning and failing fast and all these things, I have learned myself the last few years and implemented. But before, not very long ago, maybe 3 years ago, I was really stuck with trying to do things perfect, and many things were never done because of that. So I just wanted to share my thoughts on perfectionism, because they are very different than how they used to be. And I think they are very much, many times I would see people like you that would just go and do things in however it would happen, and learn on the way and carry on. And I would admire the courage, because I would not do anything like that. I would need to wrap it up beautifully as best as I could and so on. Oh my God, I have really felt sometimes that I have wasted precious time doing it. It's the hard way and very slow. And yeah.
I mean,
we'll learn.
Well, that's the thing. As long as you are doing something and getting out there, and sometimes I feel like a diehard perfectionist. I will work on things way too long, on getting small details perfect that I know, like at the end of the day, nobody even sees the web page or whatever I'm working on, right? But then at the same time, you do want to have things look reasonably well. You want it to be somewhat professional, especially when you're a business person. So something that I also want to ask you about, I believe that English is not your first language. Is that correct?
That's correct. I'm Greek originally. So yeah. Greek is my first language.
Anyone who is listening to this and you're thinking about putting out a podcast, but you're nervous about how you're going to sound, how you're going to speak, I would love to hear, like, where did you find either the courage, or how did you, I'm guessing that it wasn't necessarily the easiest thing to start speaking in front of people.
No, it was not. It was not at all. And I started saying at the very beginning that I was all my life a very closed person, very shy. I wouldn't speak to people, let alone do a podcast or do public speaking. That was, my worst nightmare. To combine this with your question about my accent, the way that I speak, the biggest difference was made, I still remember it was the first day of a public speaking course that I did. And at that time, we were all asked, all the participants, to share their fears about public speaking. So I remember saying one of mine was that my accent is, it's weird. Some people don't understand me. Some people might think that this is not the right way to speak English, or, all those things. And by the end of that day, with the feedback, the exercises and all that, I realized that my accent and the way that I'm speaking was actually a superpower rather than something that would hold me back. It is something that gives my voice a uniqueness that it has, because it sounds unusual for most. Of course, we all have different accents, of course, and your accent and an Irish person's accent and Australians, they're always different. But yeah, to answer your question, I think it's a matter of reframing it in your mind that there's nothing wrong with your accent. Your accent is a part of who you are and how you speak and how you express yourself. That is the power of your voice. So I never thought of doing lessons, phonetic lessons or things like that to improve my accent, because that's not my point at all. I want to be authentic. That's who I am. That's how my voice sounds. And of course, again, I'm sharing this answer how I see it now. If you had asked me 4 years ago, I would be very terrified about my accent, that people don't understand me and, all these things. It's one of those things that the more you do it, you get feedback from others. When I realized that you do understand my English, it's not that difficult to understand as I was thinking it was. It builds your confidence, and then, now I find it hard to stop talking.
Well, that's a great thing. I mean, I think the thing that you're pointing out is it's the story in your head that makes the difference, right? You could have chose to feel I'm weird, people aren't going to understand me, and see it as a negative, or you could say this is what makes me different, and I'm going out with it, right? I mean, that's something that I tell people on stage about speaking on stage all the time. I'm like, we're all judging people all the time, but just go out and be who you are, and you will attract the people that you want to attract. No one's going to throw anything at you. No one's going to heckle you. Like, those are the fears. Instead, you choose to see it as a positive. And that is one of the biggest things that you can do. So congratulations. And I think it's definitely a superpower. I think most people would say they enjoy listening to you talk.
Thank you.
I want to pivot just a little bit. One of the biggest questions I get all the time is, what do you need to start podcasting? So I will ask you the question, as the expert on podcasting. If somebody is looking to get started, what are the things that they need to buy?
Right. So in terms of equipment, basically you need a laptop, which I suppose most people have nowadays, and a microphone. A microphone, you don't have to break the bank for the microphone. With $50, you can buy something that is very good for starting. It's not it's not a Ferrari, but it is a very good thing. So having a microphone, a computer, and a pair of headphones, which they don't have to be anything special, just the headphones you use for your phone or your whatever like that, it's enough. Then, depending on what kind of podcast you want to do, whether you want to be interviewing people or things like that, the software might be slightly different. The software, if you want, for example, to do interviews like this one, you will need something like Zoom or Squadcast or other platforms that offer this functionality. But if you're going to do a solo podcast, or like I started with a friend of mine, you basically can use free software, which most of the times it's already embedded on your computer. For example, I have an Apple and I can use QuickTime and record anything I want. It's already there. Mm-hmm. So basically a microphone, Steve. I think that's the one thing. And sometimes it's disappointing. I will not use any stronger word. I will use the word, it's disappointing to hear a podcast that is great content, but poor audio quality because the person recording it didn't bother to get a decent microphone, and they're recording through the internal microphone of their laptop, which it's not going to sound very good, no matter how good your laptop is. So I would agree, and my microphone was $100. I think they're now $129. If you like this, it's called a Audio-Technica. I think it's an Audio-Technica 2020, something very similar to that, but it's not all that expensive. It makes you sound great. And if you do Zoom calls, because we're all in the middle of COVID still, it's going to make you sound good on Zoom calls, which is also an added benefit. But the mic is the easiest thing. You can find one for $100 or less on Amazon very easily.
And then, yeah, you can record on your phone, you can record on your computer. You don't have to do a ton of post editing by any means. Something I'll point out, I do a live intro because, to be honest, I don't like having the long drawn out intros, and I want each episode to be custom to the person that's on it. So I do a live intro. You don't have to, but that's something I do because it's easier, one, from my point of view, but also I feel it adds value to both the person that I'm interviewing and the people listening. Mm-hmm. It's a win-win-win all the way around. So, Agi, I want to ask you one more question in closing. If you could go back to when you got started and give yourself one or two pieces of advice, what would it be? This goes to anyone who is just getting started with a podcast, what would you tell yourself or tell them?
I would tell them or myself, rather than trying to learn every single detail of it myself as I go along, to get like a mentor or get into a group of people that are doing it, get some support from either peers or a mentor. That will really help you get there faster and avoiding unnecessary mistakes or things like that. So yeah, that's the one thing I would say, and not try to do everything yourself. There are other people that can also take parts of it, like promotion, for example, or whatever else it is that it does not involve the actual content, which I think in the end that is the real essence of what we do, isn't it? It's creating the content, having this conversation. Everything else is just making it more presentable and so on. But many of the other things, you don't have to do everything yourself. That would be my advice.
I think that is great advice. So one more time, you have an ebook that kind of walks people through how to get started with podcasting. That's available in the show notes. And what is the name of your podcast again?
Personal Development Mastery.
So you can find that, I'm guessing, all over the place.
You can find it every platform. Yes, it's everywhere there is. And
so if somebody was thinking about going and checking out your podcast, what are one or two of your favorite episodes that you've done?
That's a great question, and as difficult as it is to narrow 190 episodes down, I will tell you two. I don't know who listens to this and whether they will be interested at all or be switched off by what I'm about to say. But since you asked me, the two that I would direct people are, one is the 𝗵60, which is a feature I did about GaiaNet, which is an organization connecting together hard-driven people who want to create new Earth, a better environment rather than what is happening here. And the other episode, I don't remember exactly the number, I think it's 185, was quite political about how our governments are slowly taking away our liberties. And that's with Mark Ober. I think it's 185. These are two that are more recent ones, the last few months, and there are, I believe they express very well my sentiments and my point of view at this time. But, apart from that, there is so much stuff. Best thing is to click search on the website and type your keyword, what is that you're interested in, and find that. But these two really express me, and certainly people will understand very much about Agi, about who I am and what I stand for by listening to them. But thank you for asking me that.
Yeah, of course. Agi, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom and your experience with podcasting. If you guys are thinking about starting a podcast, click in the show notes, download his ebook. It will definitely help you out. You have absolutely nothing to lose and everything to gain. I just want to say thank you one more time for coming on. You've been a great guest.
Thank you, Steve.
No problem. It is my pleasure. To everybody else, till next time, take action, change lives, and make money. We'll see you soon.
I hope you enjoyed listening and that you got a huge amount of value from today's episode. If you have, please share this episode with someone who you think will benefit from it. If you want to know more about what I do, visit my website 𝘁𝗍𝗄𝗯𝗹𝗲. And until next time, stand out, don't fit in,